everyone, it's Peter Kerr from Daydream Nation, and I've got Bicyclelegs back to the channel. How are you, mate?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. Doing well. Looking forward to this show. It should be a good one.
We have got something a little bit different. We are going to talk about my vinyl collection, and the focus is compilation albums from the 70s and 80s. So I guess a lot of our entry point into music, Bicyclelegs, was getting those compilation albums, whether it was on KTEL, various artists, hits of the day, rock hits of the day. Yeah, what we'll do is we'll just maybe show a couple at a time and just talk about our memories.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember as a kid, I would often get one of these albums for Christmas present or birthday present or that sort of thing. And I used to treasure these albums because it was like being able to listen to the radio, but not have any of the ads or any of that sort of thing. You could just listen to, for the youngsters who might be watching these shows, these were the equivalent of our playlists, you know? We
Yes.
would have these and we would have the mixtapes that we would make. But yeah, I always loved these compilation albums and I still do. And as you can see, Peter, I got quite a collection of them. So
Indeed, indeed. And I understand that's all 80s. So what I'll be showing
yeah,
is 70s and 80s. So it's a little bit of a mixture. And we might have some crossovers, but all right, well, let's get stuck into it. And we might just show maybe two or three at a time and take it
yep.
from there.
Well, I'll show some of my most recent uh, gets first. Like these ones I literally got yesterday and added to the collection. And that's, oops, wrong way around. Wired volumes one and two. KTEL, as you can see on the thing there, these are KTEL compilations. And yeah, they're really, really good. I was listening to volume one of this just before we started recording for the show, and it's got some really great songs. It's got Hold On Tight by ELO and Summer of '81 by Mondo Rock. The thing with these compilations, when they were released in Australia, they'd always have to have a certain amount of Australian content on them. So it's always interesting which Australian songs they would pick. Um, this has got Beating the Boards by John English, which is not a John English song I actually knew very well when I was listening to this morning. Yeah, no, these are great compilations. And the one thing with the 80s compilations too is I love you often got these sort of graphic designs on them rather than we'll see with your 70s ones. It's a lot of photography and that sort of thing.
Yeah, a lot of wild concepts, and a lot of the Australian ones were kind of really weird and wacky. But look, I think a lot of these compilation albums were a way of pushing artists that may had needed a little bit of a leg up, like that John English song, for example. And
Mm.
yeah, that had novelty songs. They might have a comedy single. It's sort of like it's always a little bit of a mixed bag. So, what's the next one you got?
Yeah, well, the other one that I got very recently I got this for $1 at an op shop, which is a charity shop for non-Australians. And that's this one here, Red Alert. This is from right in 1980, and this is full on disco. Like the whole thing is just like disco songs.
Look at that album cover. I
Yeah,
don't think I've never been to a
and
disco where people dance like that, mate.
red
Oh,
vinyl too.
red.
Yeah. So you've got Lips Incorporated doing a couple of songs here, Funky Town and Rocket. You've got a couple of songs by the Scat Brothers, including The Wonderful Life at the Outpost, which I always love that song, Give Your Love to a Cowboy Man. You've got Moscow by Genghis Khan. You've got I Was Made for Loving You by Kiss. It's all, even a disco version of Don't Cry for Me, Argentina, which has to be heard to be believed. But
Right. There you
yeah.
go. All right. All right. Maybe show one more. We'll do
Okay.
three. We'll just do it in
This
threes.
yeah, oh, this is Star Call. And this is like on an RCA label, which was called Star Call. And but it has songs from like all different labels on it. A lot of these they would be put out by one record label, but they would be a collaboration between three or four of them. Like there'd be, RCA and EMI and Festival would all sort of chuck a few songs in together and they would take turns being the company to release them. And This has got Shandy by Kiss, which was a huge hit here in Australia. It really wasn't anywhere else, but um, it's got Hall and Oates with a song I don't really know very well of theirs called Portable Radio, but I really, really like it. It's got Whatever You Want by Status Quo, which is probably one of the few Status Quo songs I still kind of like. Um, it's got Little Genie by Elton John, so it's a really good. This is from 1980 as well, so very, very beginning of the 80s. So you
Okay.
can kind of sort of hear that crossover from those 70s sounds like Status Quo and that sort of thing, and getting into the early 80s. You've got the Tourists with I Only Want to Be With You on it as well. And yeah, it's a really good compilation though.
Total mixed bag there. Oh, nice,
Yeah.
nice indeed. All right. The first album I'm going to show you is probably one of the first albums I ever heard when I was a kid, but this is not the theme of the show. So this is an album called Impact Studio to Stereo, the breakthrough to exciting world of stereo sound. And it's very lounge music. Like you've got the stripper, soul coaxing, wheels, car takes my eyes off you. You've got all these different band leaders in their orchestras. These sort of records were my introduction to music, and they were a way to test your stereo speakers or the stereo and the fidelity. So it was very much about the fidelity. And I've actually played this recently and it sounds brilliant. But I remember playing this album, Bicyclelegs. We had one of those wooden record players, and it was like a big piece of furniture, and you'd stack the records up. And when the record was
Yeah.
finished, the next one would come down. And it was a combination of a record player and an AM wireless or radio. So anyway, that was my introduction to the sort of those compilations. Now we'll get into the pops. So this one here, 20 power hits. This is on the, I think it's on the CBS label. Johnny Farnham, Johnny Cash, OC, Smith, Flying Circus, Blood, Sweat and Tears, The Real Thing by Russell Morris. The only thing that I don't like about this album is the fidelity is terrible. It's got 20 tracks. You can see how small the track listing is. And
Mm.
they do fade outs. So The Real Thing by Russell Morris goes for, 7 minutes. It fades out. So it's like a sampler. And the fidelity of the album gets worse as you get into the inner groove. So this is the problem you have with a lot of these compilation albums, that it gives you a taster but you don't actually get to hear the full song because
Mm.
of the lack of space on the album. Another one, 24 solid hits, the 1910 Fruit Gum Company, you remember them?
Yeah.
Gary Puckett and the Union Gap, Sly and the Family Stone. And there's actually the guy I bought this album off, is actually rated all the songs. Great, 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 good, close off. So that's another thing, like people writing on albums. We sort of poo-poo
Mm.
that now, but I guess that was a thing when, in the day.
Yeah.
And one final thing, on the Columbia label, EMI, 20 explosive hits. And then it's just a mixed bag. Glenn Campbell, The Flying Circus, Stevie Wonder, George Baker Selection, Little Green Bag, Russell Morris, Rachel, Joe South, Ted Mulry, Neil Diamond, Masters Apprentices. Some really good tracks on here. They're the collage,
Yeah.
and it's all on the EMI Columbia label. And a lot of these songs were just sort of my introduction to music. And yeah, great stuff. Over to you.
All right. I'm going to go with one from 1981, which I always thought was one of my favorites, and that is In the Bag. And you see the artwork there is all kind of stamps of the bands and all that sort of thing. And you got Whip It by Devo, I mean, that's where I started with Devo. Devo is still one of my favorite bands of all time. But you've got things, this one's got some not super commercial stuff on it, like Primary by The Cure. Um, But then you talk about Grab Bag. You've got Primary by The Cure. You've got The Loved One by In Excess. You've got My Mother's Eyes by Bette Midler. You've got a Sky track. You've got Phoebe Snow. You've got ABBA. So you've got Can't Stop the Music by Village People. And then one of my absolute favorites on this record, Meaningless Songs by the Heebie Jeebies, which is a
Yeah,
comedy version of like they did like takeoffs of various different bands, but that was a takeoff of the Bee Gees. It was like meaningless songs in very high voices, and it was a big hit here in Australia. So I love. There's two Heebie Jeebies albums. They're worth checking out if you ever get a chance. Um, I love them to death. Let's go to 1982. And this is, you'll get this sort of artwork quite a bit where you get the actual record labels and stuff on the covers. And this is 1982 Out of the Blue. And you're really getting into some prime sort of second British invasion stuff on this one, like
synth
Iran
pop.
by, yeah, Iran by Flock of Seagulls and Hungry Like the Wolf and It Must Be Love by Madness. And but you've also got Freeze Frame by Jay Giles Band and I Love Rock and Roll by Joan Jett and the Blackhearts. 6 Months in a Leaky Boat by Split Ends. You know, really
What
good stuff.
what's on the flip
Um,
side of the cover? Is there any artists? Oh,
just
okay, there you go.
basically that sort of thing. And there's like some of the
Uh,
other earlier compilations, most of which I have in this pile here. In fact, I think I've got all of those.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, this is also one of my absolute favorite tracks on this one. A song that was a big hit here in Australia and nowhere else, I think, is a song called Radio by the Members. I don't know if you remember that one at all, but really good song. It was one of those ones that I rushed out and bought the single of when it came out. And then um, let's stay in 1982 and go with 1982 Up in Lights. Again, look at that lovely graphic design. You know, the back cover's kind of bland, but the back cover is, you know, the front cover is, you know, really cool. And we thought that was sort of futuristic looking back in 1982, didn't we?
Is that supposed to
And
be Sydney Tower? Is that trying to be a Sydney or I don't
yeah,
know.
I think it probably is. But
Yeah.
I mean, what have you got on here? You've got Shy Boy by Bananarama. You've got Winners by Moving Pictures, another great Australian band, you know, sort of pop rock band, most known for the song What About Me? You've got Real Men by Joe Jackson, which was, again, only a hit here in Australia. It did nothing anywhere else in the world. The big hit off that album was Steppin' Out everywhere else in the world, but here it was Real Men. So, and I've always loved Joe Jackson and I always loved the song Real Men. It's got Man Eater by Hall and Oates. But I mean, you get these synth pop songs and then you've got We Can't Be Beaten by Rose Tattoo on here as well. So,
Yep. Yep.
you know, just such a great variety on these compilations, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of these compilations actually went to number one in the charts.
They did.
And for a period of time, you know, when it published the top 40 or top 50 albums, there it was. After a period of time, they separated those albums out and put it into their own chart. I think they called it, you know, like a top 10 compilation albums. But yeah, some interesting ones. It was just basically anything that was hit and happening. So
Yep.
back to me, going back in time. This is an interesting one. This is 2SM, which was the number one radio station in the 60s and the 70s, a decade of Australian hits. So you've got Johnny O'Keefe, you've got John Farnham, you've got Russell Morris, Billy Thorpe, all these different artists, lots of different linear notes. But when you look at the album, there are no tracks in between. It's like a radio show. So
Mm,
basically, it is one long track and you play it from start to finish. And it's like you're listening to the radio with music in between. So
that's cool.
that's a really interesting one. And I remember my brother having this, and I tracked this down at a record show. Then we go into 20 explosive hits of 1971. Hot Love, from T Rex, Never Can Say Goodbye with the Jacksons or Michael Jackson, Black Knight, Deep Purple, Sweet Sweet Love, Russell Morris. Russell Morris comes up a lot in these compilations.
Mm,
And then, nothing really fancy. It just has you don't have the photos. Maybe they're saving money and just putting the names of the artists. And on EMI, the old,
yeah. Yeah, his master's voice.
yeah, don't see that label very often, do you?
No, no.
That's an early 70s label. And then we get to something that looks like a little bit of a K-Tel, the Majestic label, Dynamic Hits Volume 2. So you've got Elton, Daddy Cool, and ONJ, Olivia Newton-John. So, and you've got the record selector. Don't you remember that? Did you have that?
I don't think we ever owned one, no, but I'd always see the ads for them.
Finger touch starting, runs fast or slow, works like a computer. I wonder what computers were like in 1972. Find your favorite music in seconds, holds 24 records. I think it probably did damage to the records, Bicyclelegs.
It
What do you
might
reckon?
have.
Yeah. Anyway, that's not a bad one. There you go. Jeff St. John, Rick Springfield, 20 dynamic hits. I think that I'd put that at about circa 73, 72. Anyway,
Mm.
over to you. Next one.
All right. This is one of my absolute favorites, if not my absolute favorite of all my compilations. I owned this as a kid, and it was really my introduction. This is the only one that I'm going to show that's sort of really a genre compilation. And that is, it's another K-Tel one. It's called Touche. And this is very much a synth pop compilation. Back cover's very plain, but again, those graphics, designs, and that sort of thing, very futuristic.
Very
Or it was in
Visage.
1982. Yeah, well, they're on here with Fade to Grey. This one doesn't have as many songs on it, so the sound quality is really good on this one. There's only 6 songs per side, but you got Just Can't Get Enough, you've got Fade to Grey, you've got Love Action, you've got Tainted Love, Open Your Heart, Souvenir by Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark. You've got all these wonderful synth pop songs, Love Song by Simple Minds, but then they had to have one Australian song. There was like a requirement that there had to be Australian content on here.
Can I guess it?
Yeah.
Computer Games by My Six.
You would be wrong. It's completely incongruous, the song they chose. It's Almost With You by The Church.
What?
Yeah. It like doesn't fit into this compilation at all. Yes, a real head scratch. But that's what they went with. So
I'm trying to process that. I just can't. I just can't process that. I might send an email to Steve Kilby on that one. All right, you got another one?
here's
Yeah.
another one of my absolute favorites. I had this as a kid, and it's another one with all like the records on the front cover. And this is the Hot Ones 1983. And I got this for like 12th birthday or something like that.
I like that
And
cover.
yeah, yeah. Again, quite plain on the back, and you've got the previous ones there. So, um, but you've got like the singles on the front, and this has again a huge mix. This does have "Steppin' Out" by Joe Jackson, but it's also got "White Wedding" by Billy Idol, "I Eat Cannibals" by Toto Coelho. I don't know if you remember that one. Um, She Blinded Me with Science. I love Thomas Dolby. It's got the message. This is funny. It's got the message by Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five. And I don't know if you remember in the first verse of that song, they used the word pissing, like people pissing on the stairs. On this record, that word is bleeped. So, um, I always thought that was rather amusing. This has got Hooked on Hooks, that Skyhooks medley. Um, and then it's also got, you want to talk about comedy songs. This has got a New Zealand comedy song on it. I don't know if you remember this one, Peter. It's called Shoop Shoop Diddy Wop Cumma Cumma Wang Dang by Montevideo and the Cassettes.
I've heard the song name, but I can't sort of
Yeah.
remember it. Maybe I don't
It's
want to.
it's completely silly and ridiculous, and I love it because it's just a lot of fun. And then for another one, Let's go with the Breakers 83. This again, this is, just got pictures of some of the artists on the front there, and then you get like pictures of the albums on the back.
Yep. Yep.
And yeah, I mean, this has got, Beat It. It's got Der Kommissar by After the Fire, so the English language version of
Mhm.
Der Kommissar, which I never thought was as good as the Falco version, but it's got I'm Still Standing. It's got Little Red Corvette by Prince. Again, Let's Go to Bed by The Cure, Mad World by Tears for Fears. Um, and then you want something again completely 80s and ridiculous. You've got the Weather Girls with It's Raining Men.
Yeah, look, as I
Um,
said, it's just a mismatch, isn't it? Just anything
yeah,
that's in the charts, they just put on it or put on the album.
pretty
Did you
much.
did you notice that the vinyl was really poor quality around this era? It was really flimsy. It was like a
Yeah,
proverbial wobble board because I know there was a shortage. There was an oil crisis, and the quality of vinyl that was coming out was pretty poor. And a lot of these compilations, um, in addition to cramming as many tracks on the vinyl, the actual vinyl itself is quite flimsy. Have you noticed that with quite a few of those ones?
they're definitely thin, but the sound quality varies. Some of them, like I was listening to those wired ones that I was showing you at the beginning, they sound great. There's like 9 songs on each side, so the
Mm,
grooves are crammed. The grooves are really crammed in there. But the sound quality was actually pretty darn good considering. But yeah,
mm.
they vary in quality. Some of them sound better than others, and it was always a bit of a crapshoot as to whether you'd get a good one or a lousy one.
Yeah. Hey, before I go into my selection, because I'm probably a little
Mhm.
bit older than you, do you remember that you could go to the supermarket and buy records?
Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah, so Safeway or the Red S or Woolies, a section have a display on a stand with all the records, and you'd rotate it around and you could pick a record. And a lot of those records would be classical music or really bad compilation albums on budget labels like Rainbow, like Summit, like Dino, Hammond. Do you remember that?
Mm. Yeah, absolutely, I do. My son used to work at Big W, and before he moved, and he freaked out when I told him that Big W used to sell records and CDs and that sort of thing. So
That's like a department store for you
yeah,
guys,
yeah.
folks. Like a yeah, but
But
a
no, there was
supermarket, a supermarket.
yeah,
So you'd be
there
the
was
vegetables, and you could put it on the trolley on the conveyor belt, and you have records as well. It's just
yeah,
weird.
absolutely. There was a big Woolworths in the middle of the city here in Brisbane, and they used to sell records. They used to have like a rack of them, and you could just kind of flip through and grab them and all that sort of thing. So yeah, it was absolutely weird. And these days, people overseas don't believe this, but here in Australia, sometimes you can buy records at Aldi these days.
Well, I
So
have. I recently I was on a show with Michael Adano, and I picked up some obscure Aerosmith album off the mixing desk, which I've never seen before, and it was at Aldi. But there you go, you could buy it at the supermarket. All right, couple more of the 70s. This one's called 20 Great Australian Hits, and it's on the Fable label. Do you remember the Fable label?
yeah, vaguely. Yeah, oh yeah,
Ron,
yeah, yeah. I've seen that label before.
Ron
Yeah.
Tudor. And the big artist on the Fable label was a guy called Brian Cadd. And
Oh
he was
yes.
like the singer songwriter extraordinaire, great artist. And this one's got him, Johnny Chester, Linda George, the Cherokees, the Bootleg Family, Bobby and Laurie. But yeah, it's basically focusing on this particular record label. So that's another sub, this whole exercise of compilation. Sometimes it's a record label, an independent record label, but just showing all the artists on that label. Now we get to something a little bit quirky. I think this is circa 1979. Bacon and Eggs, the album. So this is very disco orientated. Knock on Wood, Amy Stewart, In the Navy, Village People, Shooting Star Dollar, Lost in Love. There's a lot of pap. I got this given to me as a birthday present, and it's on the Seven label. So Channel 7 is TV channel in Australia, and they had their own record label. See, Seven
Yeah.
label. They had some really weird stuff on the Seven label. They actually had Black Sabbath's greatest hits. I think they sort of bought the licensing for quite a few overseas artists and put it through their
Yeah.
label. Yeah, this was, they started to do compilations, and it was, this one's kind of very disco orientated. The worst track on this album, just for people that may be interested, was a song called Come On, Give Us a Go, the Western Suburb Singers. Look it
Is
up
that the
on
football
YouTube.
team?
Yeah, no, it's about, yeah, just watch it on YouTube, folks. I can't describe it. I got one more.
Oh, Chipmunk Punk. Oh, good Lord.
On the KTEL album.
Yeah.
They do versions of My Sharona. I didn't know that they were punk. The Cars, Good Girls
Mm.
Don't, the censored version. Frustrated, Refugee, Call Me, Crazy Little Thing Called Love, You May Be Right, Billy Joel. Not really punk, is it?
No, none of it is.
It's power pop and new wave. So there you go. Bit of a curio.
I I remember seeing ads, TV ads for that album when I was a kid. But going back to that bacon and eggs one, I actually saw a copy of that when I was going through a couple of record stores yesterday, and I actually saw a copy of that, and I nearly bought it, but I didn't in the end. But
$1?
no, no, it was a little more expensive than that, but it
Oh.
was still in the cheap bins. But and the other one with that Seven Records label, the other Black Sabbath album I remember seeing on the Seven Records label was Live at Last.
Yes, they just bought the licensing for some of these overseas artists. Very, very strange.
Yeah.